All right, let's think back to math in school. You were probably taught that there was a right answer and a wrong answer. Like that kind of goes without saying. It's math. 2 + 2 equals what? 4. Exactly. But our next guest argues that there is room, only room, a benefit to more nuance and more discussion when it comes to the subject of math. His approach is called debate math. And it uses some of the skills that people learn in like the debate club to engage young people in a subject that a lot of people have some aversion about. Chris Luzniak is an international math consultant. He's an instructional coach. He joins us now from Columbus, Ohio, to talk about this approach. Hello there.
Hi there, Bruce. Thanks for having me on. Glad to be here.
This is a show about money. We talk about it in all different ways and all different angles. But what interests me about having you join us is the math is a part of it for people. Like a lot of people have a hard time getting a handle on their money because they're so out of their mind about math. How would you characterize how people in our culture feel about math today? Has it got better? Has it got worse? What do you see?
Well, I don't know that it's changed a whole lot. There's that elitism about math. Like if you know and understand math, you must be like exceptionally smart, which I disagree with. I just think it's something that some people spend the time to learn or take the time to learn or have good teachers for. And so I my work, like you're saying, is really to dispel that elitism and make it more open for all to engage in.
So, how would you describe debate math? What does that phrase even mean?
Well, so I was a math teacher and debate coach, and I was trying to mix the two worlds together a little bit. And I started with me wanting to get students to talk about things in math. And I realized that they really wanted to talk when things were more open-ended. That if I asked them what 2 + 2 is, there's not a discussion to have there. And like even adults, we're not gonna have a discussion about what 2 + 2 is. But when I asked them more about like the process or what's the best first step or what might you do next or things like that, there was more engagement around it, and students saw math as something like more attainable for them. Like they can engage in this learning and this discourse around mathematics. And so I started creating more and more questions and opportunities and projects where students had to do things that didn't involve knowing the right answer necessarily, but more like discussing the process or the idea or like the best way to apply the answer that you got to this problem or something like that, like in the real world.
In a traditional debate, you'd have like a topic. I'm sure there's a phrase for what it is you're debating, and then you have
Sure.
two sides and people, prepare and all that. What would be an example of something you might debate using this debate math process?
There's a wide range of things. I mean, like on a small way in algebra class, like I just think about a very simple one we do all the time is with systems of equations, there's lots of ways to figure out where two lines cross. We don't need to go into the details of all that math stuff. But I would just ask students, what is the best method for solving this? Which of these like three methods that we learned do you want to use on this and why? And there may be no right answer to that, like which one's the best. They may all work well. Sometimes one might be more efficient or more elegant or something. And so I want to leave it open to that. But it can be a quick question like that, like whether it's in writing on their homework or just like a class discussion or a partner discussion, or it could be a longer project-y type question. Like I do things, one of my famous ones is about the music industry and where would a new artist want to sign on, like with a major record label versus an independent record label versus like self-employed, and like how the profit sharing works and all that stuff. And like there's no right answer, but like you get more profits if you get really famous, but you have to share a lot of that if you're in the major record label world, right? You get to keep more of the money in the indie world, but you don't get as popular necessarily. And so like all the real world things. And I think math has sometimes just taken away from the world, and it's like this cold just number thing that makes no sense to people. I think that's also another reason why people get turned off from the math world.
Yeah, well, I would love it if we could engage kids on topics related to personal finance. Have
Sure.
you lobbed any of those into your classroom? Have you talked about compound interest or planning for your future or pay yourself first or any of those kinds of things?
Yeah, for sure. This is going way back, but one of my first ones I did back when I was living in New York City and teaching in New York City public schools. And, rent is expensive. And a down payment on a home in New York City is also really high. But I asked my students, is it better to rent or buy now, like to spend all my money on this down payment and maybe not get it, or to rent and continue to save up money for a bigger down payment. Like, what is the better option there? And I just left it at that. Like, I didn't give any details. They had to go online and find prices and ranges and things like that, and make some assumptions and do some modeling from there. But things like that, I've done, like, what's the best credit card to choose and things like, and based on the rewards. Like, I mean, flight rewards mean a lot to me. I like to travel, but it may not mean anything to you, right? You want different kinds of awards. And so the APR and the rewards and all these things all mixed together in a complicated decision-making tree.
I have only a few regrets in life, but one is that I didn't join the debate club. I think I would have loved it. I think I would have crushed it. But the other thing that I would have gained is some structured thinking, an approach to critical thinking that I think is helpful in so many different areas. Can you talk a bit about how you help students think through the crafting of an argument?
For sure. So I'd say, first of all, I really stress that there's a lot of times there isn't a correct answer. That's a big part of it. And I think in math, we think there always has to be a right answer. And I talk with teachers all the time about, in the US here, like, I'm currently in Ohio, and the way we define trapezoids includes rectangles. And next door in Pennsylvania, rectangles are not trapezoids. They're more restrictive in the definition. So based on where I'm standing on this earth, the definition of a shape could change based on, like, state standards and things like that. So there are a lot of things in math that are a lot more complex and debatable or argumentative than people realize. But we just teach it in this cold way, like, here's the fact. Like, in Ohio, teachers just teach, here's the fact, here's what a trapezoid is by our state definition, and we just move on and don't even talk about the nuance. So I, first of all, embrace the nuance. I want us to not see everything as black and white. And then I give students a structure of how to talk. We use, in high school, we use the phrase, my claim is, my warrant is. Like, everything has to be kind of like a proof in math. You have to give your statement, you have to give a reason behind it. And then we can build from there to build deeper and deeper arguments.
Where do the basics fit in? Because you've got students who, yeah, you want them to be engaged, and yeah, you want nuance, and yeah, you want critical thinking, but there is standardized testing. There are grades, there are college applications, there are all those things that follow a pretty, I don't know, linear or predictable route. How do you fold those things in such that there is a balance?
I see them as all blending together. I'm not debating all day, every day in class all the time. It's just peppered in throughout, but it's a part of every topic, every lesson, every unit, that there's at least a question or two to show that not every unit has correct answers we're looking for, like a very fixed structure to it. I want to expand their thinking on it and go a little further. But I mean, even simple things that you talk about, 2 plus 2, like 10 plus 10. Yes, we want people to know that it's 20, but also when we talk about time, 10 o'clock plus 10 hours is like 8 p.m.
Right.
unless you're in military time or something, right? So, like, there's so much, like, yes, I want you to know this answer, but also there is some nuance to it. And I think kids, especially as they grow older, can handle that, and we just rob them of that, and that's where they lose the love of math.
You were talking in another context about a student you had who had been reticent to volunteer her answers. And then in a debate format, it was like a flower blooming. Can you talk a bit about what you have seen from a results perspective in terms of kids who weren't necessarily feeling included in the conversation, who now are, because you've made such a pronounced shift in focus?
For sure. Yeah. I think you're talking about, I was doing some work with my consulting with some school districts in Utah, and working with the teacher, and she really wanted to try debate math. And so we created a lesson together, and I went in and taught it, and I introduced the students to, like, here's the sentence frame of how we're going to debate. Here's how we're going to start. And we started the class off with just a quick open-ended question, and a girl shared out, and we did the lesson. She shared out several times. And afterwards, the teacher told me she has never spoken up in class the entire school year so far. That was the first time she's ever spoken up in class. And she did it several times. And that happens a lot to me, like, especially students who don't see themselves as math people. They think of math students, a good math students, as people who, like, know the right answer really fast. And so if they don't know the answer, they just don't see themselves as a part of the math community, and they don't want to partake in the discussion often. And so when I give them an open-ended question, I give them a structure to lean on to like how to organize your statement. Suddenly students feel like, okay, I can try this, and I have things to say. Like teenagers especially have tons of opinions. We all know this, and so they're excited to share their thoughts in math class. And so it happens a lot. I'd say most often teachers come back to me to say that their quietest or most struggling students are the first ones to jump in. And I'd say on the other end, sometimes the strongest students are the most afraid to jump in because they are
Right.
so good at getting the right answer. This is like uncomfortable for them. And I think it's good for them, but it's an uncomfortable thing that kind of shuts them down for a little bit.
Your focus principally is on young people, it sounds like teens in particular. As you bring this conversation or this idea to a broader population, people who were students long ago, what do you think they can take away from this idea of debate math that could apply to life as an adult?
A lot. It's a lot of my work now. And especially we're in the US here in an election year, so I'm doing a lot of work outside of education around that kind of stuff, and thinking about how to help people think through things deeply and possibly change their mind about some topics. And I think sometimes the math world sends the message that there's always a right answer in life. And I think my debate work is counter to that, saying that sometimes there isn't always a right answer. You have to really think deeply about both sides and then make decisions whatever you think is best for you. And it may not always be the best in the end, but things are much more complex, much more in that gray area than a black and white world. And I want adults, just like the students I teach, to see that like things are not as fixed as we sometimes are taught they are in school, and there is a lot more nuance and complication there.
Really interesting stuff. Chris, thanks for making time to talk to us today. We appreciate it.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Chris Luzniak is an international math consultant. He is an instructional coach. He is the founder of Debate Math, in which he brings students together and has them actually talk about numbers instead of just adding them up.